It all started when I was in college. My name is Sophie, and I was a bubbly 21-year-old girl who had a passion for music. I was part of a local band that played in various bars and clubs around town. Our band was a hit, and we were getting more and more gigs each month. One day, we got a call from a guy named Dave who claimed to be a talent scout for a big-time record label. He said he saw us play at a local bar and was interested in signing us. We were ecstatic. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. Dave set up a meeting with us, and we all went to his office downtown. Dave was a middle-aged man, probably in his 40s, with a balding head and a beer belly. He offered us a deal that seemed too good to be true. He promised us fame, fortune, and a recording contract. All we had to do was sign on the dotted line. We were so excited that we didn't even read the contract properly. We just signed it without even thinking twice. Little did we know, we had just signed our lives away to Dave. Fast forward a few months, and our band had hit the big time. We were playing in stadiums and had fans all over the world. But something was off. We were barely making any money, and Dave was taking a massive cut of our earnings. We tried to confront him about it, but he always had an excuse. "It's just business," he would say. "You're lucky to have me as your manager." But we weren't lucky. We were being taken advantage of, and I wasn't going to stand for it any longer. One day, I decided enough was enough. I went to Dave's office and demanded to see the contract we had signed. He reluctantly handed it over, and I read it through properly for the first time. It was worse than I thought. Dave had complete control over our music, our image, and our finances. We were his puppets, and he was pulling all the strings. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started doing research and found out that Dave had a history of ripping off young musicians like ourselves. He had a reputation for being a sleazy, greedy businessman. I went back to Dave's office with all the evidence I had gathered. I confronted him about his shady business practices, and he lost his temper. He started shouting and throwing things around the room. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can take me down? I've been in this business for decades. Who do you think you are?" I just stood there, calm and collected. "I'm someone who's not going to let you take advantage of me anymore," I said. That's when Dave tried to physically attack me. He charged at me, but I was too quick for him. I avoided his punch and pushed him away. "You're pathetic. I'm done with you and your slimy ways." I walked out of his office and never looked back. Our band found a new manager, one who was honest and fair, and we went on to have even more success than before. As for Dave, I heard he went bankrupt a few years later. Karma's a witch, isn't it? I was sitting at the local coffee shop, sipping on my latte and scrolling through social media when I saw a post from my ex-best friend, Emily. She had thrown a party the night before and had not invited me. Not that I really cared, but what bothered me was the reason she gave for not inviting me. Apparently, I was too boring and didn't know how to have a good time. This hurt me deeply because Emily and I had been friends since we were 8. But as we got older, she became more interested in partying and drinking while I focused on my studies and career. Our paths started to diverge, and eventually, we grew apart. But seeing that post made me angry. I didn't want to be friends with someone who thought so little of me. So I decided to get my revenge. I started by reaching out to Emily's ex-boyfriend, Jake. We had always gotten along well, and he was still friends with some of Emily's current friends. I asked him if he could help me get an invitation to Emily's next party. "Sure thing," Jake said. "But what are you going to do once you're there?" "I'm going to show Emily that I'm not as boring as she thinks," I replied with a smirk. The night of the party arrived, and I dressed up in my most glamorous outfit. When I arrived, Emily looked surprised to see me, but she didn't say anything. "Hey, Emily, thanks for inviting me." Yeah, no problem," she said, clearly uncomfortable. As the night went on, I made sure to be the life of the party. I danced, I drank, and I flirted with some of the guys there. Emily looked on with a mixture of shock and jealousy. At one point, Emily came up to me and tried to start a conversation. "Wow, I didn't know you had it in you," she said with a sneer. "What can I say? I'm full of surprises," I replied with a wink. Emily scowled and walked away. Later in the night, when Emily was good and drunk, she approached me again. "You know, I don't understand why you're trying so hard," she slurred. "You're still boring." I smiled sweetly at her. "Oh, Emily, I'm not trying hard at all. This is just who I am. Maybe if you tried to get to know me instead of judging me, you would realize that—" Emily's face twisted in anger, and she took a swing at me. But I had anticipated her reaction. She was so slow because she was wasted, and I dodged her swing. She stumbled and fell to the ground, looking ridiculous. The other partygoers had noticed the commotion and were now looking at us in shock. "Wow, Emily, you really know how to make a scene," I said sarcastically. Emily got up, her face red with anger. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" "No, Emily, I don't think I'm better than you. I just think we're different, and that's okay." Emily tried to attack me again, but this time one of the other partygoers stepped in and restrained her. "Enough, Emily. You're drunk, and you're embarrassing yourself," he said firmly. She told me, of course, to get out of her house. I took that as my cue to leave. I had shown Emily that I was not to be underestimated, and I had put her in her place. The next day, I woke up to a text from Jake. "Hey, I heard about what happened at the party last night. You really showed Emily who's boss." I smiled to myself as I read the message. It felt good to know that I had the support of people who knew the real me. I was never the kind of person to seek revenge. I always believed that karma would take care of those who did me wrong. But when it came to Brittany, I couldn't just sit back and let her get away with what she did to me. Let me give you some background. My name is Rose, fake name, and I'm 31 years old. I've always been a bit of a loner, but I never really minded. I had my books and my music, and that was enough for me. Brittany, on the other hand, was the popular girl in high school. She was beautiful, popular, and had everything going for her. I was always a bit envious of her, but I never really had a reason to dislike her. That all changed when we both applied for the same job at a local coffee shop. I had been working there for a few months as a barista, and I loved it. I was good at my job, and my customers loved me. When I heard that Brittany had applied, I didn't think much of it. I assumed that she would get the job since she had more experience than me. But to my surprise, I got the job instead. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. Maybe they had mixed up our applications or something. But when I found out that Brittany had been rejected, I knew something was up. She didn't take the news well. She stormed out of the coffee shop, and I didn't hear from her for a while. Fast forward a few months, and things were going great. I was still working at the coffee shop, and I had made some great friends there. But then, one day, I started to notice that my tips were decreasing. At first, I thought it was just a fluke, but it kept happening. I couldn't figure out what was going on. One day, I overheard Brittany talking to one of her friends at a nearby table. "I've been going to the coffee shop every day and not tipping Rose," she said. "She doesn't deserve it. I should have gotten that job." I was shocked. I couldn't believe that someone would do something so petty and vindictive. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. So I came up with a plan. I started a secret competition between Brittany and me. Every day, I would try to outdo her in some way. If she wore a nice outfit, I would wear something even nicer. If she got a new haircut, I would get one too. I didn't let her know that I was competing with her, but I could tell that it was getting under her skin. One day, Brittany came into the coffee shop with a new designer handbag. It was beautiful, and I could tell that she was proud of it. I knew that I had to one-up her, so I went out and bought a brand new car. It was expensive, but it was worth it to see the look on her face when I drove it to work. "Wow, Rose," she said when she saw the car. "I guess you're doing pretty well for yourself, huh?" I just smiled. "I'm doing okay," I said. But things didn't end there. I knew that I had to take it one step further, so I came up with a plan to get Brittany fired from her job. I knew that she was dating one of the managers at a nearby restaurant, so I started to flirt with him. I didn't really have any interest in him, but I knew that Brittany would be jealous. It worked. Brittany found out about my flirting, and she was furious. She stormed into the coffee shop and confronted me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she said, her voice shaking with anger. "What are you talking about? I asked innocently. You know exactly what I'm talking about, she said. You're trying to steal my boyfriend. I just laughed. I don't want your boyfriend, Brittany. I was just being friendly. She didn't believe me, but I could tell that she was starting to get nervous. She knew that her relationship with the manager was on the line, and she didn't want to lose her job. A few days later, I overheard the manager talking to the owner of the coffee shop. Brittany's been causing a lot of drama lately, he said. I think it's time to let her go. I felt a small twinge of guilt as I listened to the conversation, but I knew that it was for the best. Brittany was toxic, and she needed to learn that her actions had consequences. The day that Brittany was fired was a good day. Allow me to tell you the tale of how I taught my neighbor, Karen, a lesson she'll never forget. It all started when my husband, Tom, and I moved into our new house in the suburbs. We were thrilled to finally have a backyard for our two young children, Emily and Max, to play in. However, our excitement was short-lived when we met Karen, the neighbor from hell. Karen was a middle-aged woman with a short bob and a permanent scowl on her face. She made it her mission to make our lives miserable from the moment we moved in. She would call the police on us for having a few friends over for a barbecue, complain about our children's laughter, and even went as far as to spray pesticides on our garden without permission. I tried my best to stay civil with Karen, but she was relentless. It wasn't until one day when Emily came home crying that I decided enough was enough. Mommy, Karen called me a mean name and said I wasn't allowed to play with her grandkids, Emily sobbed. I was livid. How dare Karen bully my sweet little girl? I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I concocted a plan to teach Karen a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. The next day, I knocked on Karen's door. She opened it with a scowl. What do you want? She snapped. I want to apologize for any inconvenience we may have caused you. I understand we've had a few noise complaints, and I just wanted to make things right, I said, putting on my best fake smile. Karen looked taken aback, but quickly regained her composure. Well, it's about time you realized how annoying you've been, she sneered. I nodded and played along. Yes, of course. I was actually hoping you could give me some advice on how to be a better neighbor. Karen's face softened, and she invited me inside for some coffee. As we sat at her kitchen table, I pretended to take notes as she ranted about all the things she disliked about us. I made sure to ask her plenty of questions and act genuinely interested. I see, I said, nodding along. Thank you so much for your advice, Karen. I'll make sure to take everything you said into consideration. As I got up to leave, Karen seemed pleased with herself. Little did she know, I had a trick up my sleeve. Over the next few weeks, I put Karen's advice into practice. I started waking up at the crack of dawn and mowing my lawn, cleaning my gutters, and washing my car all before 8 a.m. I even started inviting my friends and family over more frequently, making sure to be as loud as possible. At first, Karen seemed pleased with the changes, but it wasn't long before she started to lose her cool. One day, as I was mowing my lawn at 7 a.m., Karen stormed out of her house in her bathrobe. "Can't you do that later? You're waking up my grandkids!" she yelled. "Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I'm just taking your advice and trying to be a better neighbor," I said sweetly. Karen huffed and stormed back inside. But I didn't stop there. The next day, I threw a massive party that lasted well into the night. Karen banged on our door at 11 p.m., screaming about the noise. "Hey, Karen, we're just having a good time. I'm just trying to be a better neighbor like you suggested," I said, grinning. Karen was fuming, and I could tell I was getting to her. I kept up my antics for a few more weeks until Karen finally snapped. One morning, as I was taking out the trash, Karen stormed out of her house and confronted me. "I've had enough of your nonsense," she screamed. "You're the worst neighbor I've ever had." I put on my best innocent face and said, "I'm just trying to be a good neighbor like you suggested, Karen." Karen's face turned red with anger, and she lunged at me, but I was prepared. I had my phone out and recorded the whole thing. In the video, Karen could be seen screaming at me and attempting to hit me. I took the video to the police and filed a report against Karen. She was charged with assault and harassment. and she ended up having to pay a hefty fine. From that day forward, Karen left us alone and even avoided making eye contact with us. I never wanted to stoop to Karen's level, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. I made sure to thank Karen for her advice on being a better neighbor, and it ended up being the best revenge I could have asked for. Lesson learned, Karen. Don't mess with a mom on a mission.